Love it. So rather than give you a lot of potential leadership concepts, I'm going to dive in, give you the leadership concept, and I'm going to give you all the ways that the text we just read kind of indicates that. My first, and if you want, I haven't shared it, have I? Were y'all able to get into the download last week? Okay. Anyone with the link? All right. So the link for the download is available. And so you can look at that if you want to. What I wrote down for my main leadership concept today is not coherent, but leaders see roots or routes. It's kind of play on words. They see roots, R-O-O-T-S, and then roots, R-O-U-T-E-S. Get it? Okay, cool. It was funny. My initial plan was to do leaders can see the train wreck. And what was clicking to me as I read through this passage is the leaders that were effective, and Kayla touched on this a little bit, were so impassioned by something that happened, by a personal conviction, some sort of resolve they had, or something that they experienced, like with Josiah, that it impacted the way that they operated. And so the idea for me is there's, for many of us, a lack of awareness toward the things we need to deal with, the problems that we have, or the solutions that need to come. But if we don't become aware of the problem, we don't solve any problems. Many of us are just unaware that the things we see as problems aren't actually the problem, but there's a deeper root level issue. And so the awareness is a factor. And then on the far end of it, many of us aren't problem solvers by nature. And we talked about grit last week. There's a level of grit necessary to solve a problem. So many of us, it's not just that we're not aware of the problem, it's that we aren't good at solving problems. And so we need to develop an acumen for being able to solve problems. There are tools out there that I could help you with. There are scientific ways to actually isolate and solve problems. And then the third level of it is maybe we can become aware of it. Maybe we can think of how to solve the problem, yet we lack the discipline or diligence necessary to execute. And those are the three factors I'm going to lightly discuss today. So how does the text indicate this? I'm just going to give you a real quick list of them. First, in chapter 29, verse 3, says Hezekiah repaired the temple doors. You see that there's a connection usually between the success of the king and their willingness to not just instate reforms, but to repair physical structures. And so Hezekiah comes in, sees the problem with the temple, which is the center of the religious, for lack of a better term, cult of the time. And he says, this isn't working. And he recognizes that there's something deeper to it. If this isn't working, if these doors are not repaired, if they don't look good, then people won't go to it as the source of some of their sustenance. And so what does he do? He repairs the temple doors. And then he calls the Levites in to cleanse the temple. And that's in 29, verse 18. One of the things I found really interesting about him calling the Levites in to cleanse the temple, because, you know, if you just remember, I just kind of preached lightly on Levites. I've been doing a lot of study into Levites. I didn't know they were so important, but like they are. And it's really fun to do that deeper study into Levites. Well, they weren't naturally the priests. And you see this in 2 Chronicles. The text actually indicates that the Levites consecrated themselves better. Did y'all see this? Consecrated themselves better than the priests. The Zadok priesthood is not operating at the capacity God would want them to. And it's become clear by whoever's writing the Chronicle that the Levites that Hezekiah calls up to do stuff, they're being effective with it. I found that just unique and quite interesting. I wrote chapter 29, verses 25 through 28. He brought the music back. He brought the temple singers back. Levites are killing the game under Hezekiah. He reinstitutes the Passover in verse 30. In verse 31, he begins doing another thing that is kind of a measure of success for a king in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, specifically 2nd Chronicles, actually really only 2nd Chronicles, because David, of course, he's cool. He destroys the idols. He destroys the idols. that don't focus on Yahweh. 6, or the next one, Manasseh built the outer wall of Jerusalem. Construction projects were crucial for the success of a king. Manasseh builds the outer wall of Jerusalem. In verse 14 of chapter 33. What's interesting about this? Well, this is after Manasseh screws up, gets led in chains over to Assyria, and then ends up coming back after praying to the Lord, seeking him for repentance and having a heart shift. I preached on this in the fall during our prison sentences series, and I geeked out over it because there were a lot of things I didn't know, and I used some extra biblical literature that's technically apocryphal, but it's historical, and I was really proud of it. But y'all didn't know that. That's okay. Y'all don't have to be excited about it. Later on, verse 15 of chapter 33, Manasseh removed foreign gods as well. Chapter 34, verse 4, you got Josiah. Now, Josiah, he tears down the altars. Josiah repairs the temple. And it's when he's repairing the temple, y'all hear this, it is when he starts to do something that is indicative of normal success for a king, but he starts to repair the temple, which he would have done because he's seeking a deeper level cause for the dysfunction in Judah. As he's repairing the temple, then God reveals something to the people in the temple, Hilkiah specifically, or Hilkiah, that they weren't aware of. And this is what I want to talk about today. And Kayla did a great job, so I ended up going to 1st or 2nd Kings for a second to see if I could find more information so that I could give you guys more inspiration. Illumination, that's it. But I want to talk about Josiah and his response about the lost book of the law. And she referred really well to this. But I think for us, we have to see the train wreck or the root cause of different problems in order to be effective in solutions and as leaders. We have to be able to see the train wreck. Like Josiah, he could have done what all the other kings did except for Hezekiah. He could have done what so many of the other kings did when there was a clear issue in the land of Judah and ignored it. He could have just ignored it. But when it became clear to him, after choosing to repair the temple, and in the repairs of the temple, he is getting money from the people in Judah, tithes from them, using the Levites and other priests to go in and start bringing in stuff from rock quarries and doing all these other things. And as they remove old materials to replace them with new materials, they find the lost book of the law from Moses. I don't know how long this was lost. I mean, I can't imagine it was a short period of time that it was lost. Like the way they're keeping historical documents, I'm not seeing a whole lot about the book of the law in 2nd Chronicles. In fact, I believe 1st, 2nd Chronicles was written after they had come back from exile from Babylon, and Ezra, Nehemiah, they come in, Nehemiah builds a wall, Ezra reinvigorates a focus on the law. You saw this in the first video that I sent you guys. And when he comes back, when they come back in, they have the book of the law and they want to start enacting the expectations and standards of this law. And so when 1st, 2nd Chronicles is written, I think part of it is because they are showing the chronicles of the kings from David all the way through to the end. And they don't really speak a lot about the book of the law or anything about the book of the law through the entirety of the time. And so what it's trying to help people understand is that a huge portion of that whole season of kingdom in Judah was missing a major component to what would have made them successful as they followed Yahweh. And so Josiah from Hilkiah hears about this lost book of the law and they start reading it to him. And have you ever been told something you weren't aware of about yourself? I remember I gave one of the staff members at Forest Park feedback when I first got here because I had heard about their reputation, and it was before I was able to see anything. And so I revealed to them what I had heard about their reputation, and they responded to me like, Nobody ever told me that. Nobody ever told me that. And so I'm like, well, I'm glad I did then. There have been so many circumstances for me where I wasn't aware of something and then somebody revealed it to me. And because I wasn't aware and then I immediately became aware, it kind of wrecked me a little bit. It's like you look back and you think, oh my gosh, my whole life I've been doing this. My whole life I've been emotionally unavailable. My whole life I've been living life one way, and now I need to shift it. You feel like you're too far gone. And when Josiah's hearing after they send it to the prophetess and she sends it back and says, hey, you're gonna die before this, but it's too late. Like Josiah, this is why he rips it. Ripping his vest is a sign of blasphemy, but it's also a sign of just being immediately like stressed out, impassioned, broken for some sin or some other circumstance. And Josiah becomes aware. And when he becomes aware, he's already started some of the reforms, but when he becomes aware, he then goes in and he makes sure he sends information out to the people that are relevant, and he brings them in and he says, we're going to read this. We're going to go over this because we've missed it. He saw the train wreck. He saw the root cause, and he was willing to be a part of the implementation of a new way of doing things. So that's how the text says it. I can give you a couple other examples of seeing the train wreck. Leaders who saw the train wreck, leaders who are willing to be a part of the solution, see the root causes. I'm gonna zoom through these real quick. Moses, he was called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. He saw the problem. We know he saw the problem because he killed that dude in Egypt when he was treating a Hebrew slave the wrong way. Now, that was the wrong way to approach it. And so he goes out into the wilderness for a long period of time. And then God calls him to do it in a way that God would honor. But he saw the problem. He saw the train wreck and knew something had to be done. Joshua recognized that when they lost to the small little nation state of Ai, after having formerly beat people that were way bigger than Ai, he realized there was sin in the camp. And so he went through what was necessary to hear from God and adjust it. So they cast lots, which isn't the way I would do it these days, but they did it that way back then. And they find that Achan had taken some items that were under the ban. I'm not going to give you the full context there, but long story short, he saw the root cause. It was sin. John the Baptist saw the root cause of the problems in Israel, and he goes and addresses them quite vigorously. And he prepares the way of the Lord in so doing. Paul realizes that there's a significant problem in Judaism, and he addresses it. That problem is that Judaism is not accessible to Gentiles, but what Jesus came to preach is. So how do I make the gospel accessible to those who are Gentiles and lead Israel or Jews to make it accessible as well? And you see this manifest in Acts chapter 15 with what we call the Jerusalem Council. And you see this in Galatians second half of chapter 1 when he addresses Peter, because Peter's not playing ball. Paul sees that problem. It's just his personality. And First John, you see John, I believe the apostle, addressing an early form of Docetism, which is a variation of Gnosticism, which pretty much said that Jesus never came in the flesh. Well, he did. This is what John, he's seen the problem in the community where John ministered. You got James. He's saying, you know what? The gospel that Paul preached is a great gospel, yet I see a lot of people just being licentious, living in their freedoms and doing what they want to do. And so he says, faith without works is dead. Well, faith requires activity. Even if salvation doesn't require you to do anything, living in faith is accompanied by activity. James sees the problem with one side or the other. John sees the problems in the 7 churches of Asia Minor. Later on in history, Martin Luther sees the issue with the Pope in Rome. He goes and visits, and he's like, we can't do this. So what does he do? He writes the 95 Theses, posts them on the Catholic Church wall, gets in big trouble, and then turns Germany into a Protestant nation over time. You got John Wycliffe, who sees the issue with the fact that Catholic masses are all done in Latin. And he says, we're going to do this in the vernacular. Vernacular is the common tongue. Nobody understands Latin. Why aren't we preaching the Bible? This is the same thing. John Wycliffe is like, I say a modern day, but like a 15th century Josiah. He's like, whoa, these people need to realize what this is about. I'm just giving you about Jonathan Edwards, the first Great Awakening. Let's go to Jesus. He sees the issues. He sees the train wreck of Israel. He sees the train wreck within the temple when they're selling birds and all these other things, when they're leaving foreign people completely out, even of the portico, and they're not becoming a house for the nations. And he calls them a den of robbers. There's a train wreck happening. What's he going to do? And I think when he flips temple tables, it is a physical symbol of what he actually came to do, to address the significant issue that is happening in the land of Israel. What's he say? He says, the only sign I'm going to give you, Pharisees, is the sign of Jonah. He was in the belly of a fish 3 days and 3 nights. Well, that is super confusing. What does that even mean? Was he predicting the fact that he was going to die and resurrect? Maybe. I think that's the truth. But I think what he was also indicating was that the nation of Israel was in a train wreck where they were missing the point, that they were more focused on their system than they were what God had called them to do, which was be a house for the nations, a blessing to the rest of the world. Jesus saw the train wreck and he came to address it, the hostility between us and God, the disconnect between us and God, and he came to fix it. This is what leaders do. Leaders see the train wreck. They see root causes, they address root causes, and then they find routes to success, and they execute. So the first thing I want us to do, I want us to see the root. I want us to see the root, R-O-O-T. I want us to see root causes. Great leaders see root causes. The example I'll give you is, and you'll probably identify with this, I'm not a doctor. So when I go into the doctor's office, really the only thing I can give them is symptoms. You know what I'm saying? Like you go in, it hurts here. What's your pain level? 1 through 10. 2, 7. You know how unaware you are of your own bodily functions when you go into the doctor and you're like, I don't know how I feel at all. Where does it hurt? I asked my wife the same thing because I'm gauging her awareness. I don't know. I say, is it a bone issue, a tendon issue, or a muscle issue? And she's like, what? I don't know the difference. But it's funny because you can tell the difference between them when you become cognizant of those things. But just in the physical area, often we go with the symptoms. And so a doctor will try to hear your symptoms. And when they hear your symptoms, what they do is they're assessing all of those symptoms and trying to find the underlying root issue. This is what a doctor will do. People come up to me, and I'm not a doctor. I washed out of that program. But I've been doing this for a couple of years. I was a worship leader for 7 years at a different church. And people will come up and they'll say, music was too loud today. I'm like, okay. I'll tell you this. We know it's not too loud. Decibly. In terms of decibels, it's not too loud. So what do I know? They're giving me a symptom, and I've got to find the underlying root cause of their impression, perception, or feeling. So when I hear the symptom of it's too loud, what I know is the mix might be off. They might be in a mood. They may have hearing issues. There may have been an issue with one of our vocalists. There may have been an issue with one of the instruments. The treble may be too high. The room dynamic might need to be adjusted lightly. The fact is, we're in a garage. It's not too loud. It's just reverberating off everything else. And if you turn it down, it doesn't solve that problem, right? That's one symptom, but there are a bunch of potential root causes. So I'll ask questions to dive in and investigate. And that's really the first thing you got to do if you're trying to see the problem and see the root issue. You have to ask questions. Here are a couple examples of symptoms. I just want to give you. I just gave you the music is loud one. At the workplace, I just picked a random name of a person. I put Bernard's performance is low. He's not happy in his role. Those are symptoms. Why is he performing poorly? Why is he not happy? Is it something at home? Is there something else going on? Like, what is the real issue behind that? And I get frustrated really easy at a volunteer, my wife, a staff member, my kids, because of a symptom but there is a root cause that is like behind or underlying that specific symptom. If someone's performance is low, maybe something is happening behind the scenes that I'm unaware of. And knowing that there's a root cause will give me grace on the specific symptoms or how it's addressed. The third one, my spouse isn't making headway on chores that they should be doing. My spouse doesn't seem to care about anything I say. Well, that's probably not true. What's the underlying cause to it? Are they stressed at work? Are they frustrated about something you did and they just haven't told you yet? What is the root cause? Good leaders will find the root cause, because if you keep addressing symptoms, you never effectively enact a new system. It doesn't help you. So spend time asking questions. Here are a couple questions you might ask. Get the whole list of symptoms. What are my symptoms? And I'm talking about leadership issues. If you want to solve problems, you got to ask questions. If you're not curious, you don't ask questions, you're not going to be a great leader in the long run. What are my symptoms? Second one, what are the possible systems that are causing these symptoms? Sometimes you're like, here's a symptom. Well, it's this system. Maybe not. It might not be that. I might be frustrated at work during a week and then I'm happy the next week. And it has nothing to do with what happened at work. It probably is just that I didn't sleep enough this week versus last week. It's probably that something at home is not comfortable. It's probably that my kid's starting baseball or t-ball this week. It's a list of things. Find what possible systems are affecting and causing these symptoms. The third one, which system seems to underlie the majority of these symptoms? So what are we doing? It's what I said here. We are identifying symptoms and isolating causes. And if you can isolate those causes, you're going to be effective at finding solutions as well. And we see this with Hezekiah and Josiah. What are the symptoms? Well, you got disunity that is rampant in Israel. You've got oppression happening from the leaders of Israel, but you're also got oppression from other countries. You've got a weak priesthood, as we see when the Levites are consecrating themselves better than the Zadok priests. You've got weak judges. You've got no common culture. Well, those are the symptoms. Those are the problems. So why are Hezekiah and Josiah really good? Because they're able to look at the possible systems. Hezekiah is already addressing a system. Josiah is already addressing a system when he starts repairing the temple. So what are the possible systems? You got religion. Religion is a big impact on culture. You got the justice system or the legal code. And then you got other countries. Well, it's hard to control the other countries. Nebo, like he's coming. It's just going to happen. But you can address the way that you operate your religious structure and your justice system. So this is where you have the Levites. Josiah leading the Levites pretty heavily, and Hezekiah especially leading the Levites. Well, there's a Levitical code. He starts reenacting the justice system in a way that God would have him do it. Josiah brings in the book of the law. It's a legal system. And he found that legal issue because he was addressing the religious system in the temple. They found something that undergirded the symptoms. What are you going to do? Maybe your symptoms are that you're tired, angry, sad, deflated, lethargic, snappy, unproductive. Could be any list of those things. Well, the underlying systems are almost always something physical, something emotional, something mental, something organizational, or something spiritual. Which system? Could be all of them, but it's probably one more than the others. And you got to address one system at a time because you can't multitask. No matter what you think. My wife is way better at it than me, but when she's looking at a phone playing a game, she is not as attentive as when she's not. You can't multitask. So you got to jump in and you got to start addressing these symptoms. So what does it look like? Some of these systems might be you're taking medicine and it's affecting your body. You're not sleeping enough. Your home life's whack right now. You're not exercising. You're not reading your Bible. You don't have any chill time. You're not spending any time with your friends and family members. All of those things could affect some of these other things. And you've got to address those systems. That is what I have become cognizant of in my life that I have started to work on. I struggle sometimes to form deep relationships. I can blame it on my mom for moving us all around when I was a kid, but now I'm an adult. And so when I realized that my emotional intelligence was one of the root issues behind why relationships aren't as deep as I'd like them to be, plus personality defects and all that other stuff, what do? I get a counselor and I start working on my emotional fitness. And I've developed over time and grown in that area. What system do you need to start addressing? You got to see the root causes and you got to start addressing them. So that's my second point, is you got to see the root, R-O-U-T-E. You got to see the root. So once you find the root causes, cool. What do I do with it? What do I do now? And I've got to be able to problem solve, identify, and start being able to move in a particular direction. I wrote this: if you don't see the pathways, you're lost. Makes sense. You're just lost. If you can't see pathways, you're just lost. And many leaders are leading, they're just lost. What was it? Blind leading the blind is what they say. And that's what many leaders are. They don't know where they're going. This is what I see with a lot of middle managers. It's like, yeah, that's what they told me to do, so I'm going to tell you to do it. And I see that lost leaders do not help people find destinations. Are you a lost leader? Here are a couple examples of lost leaders. And I just thought of one, so I'll add it at the end. One, they can't picture what their success looks like. Like, can you conjure up an image of what your success in specific areas looks like? Have you even tried? Then you're lost. If you don't see the pathway, you're just walking aimlessly. Second one, you get distracted very easily. People who are focused on a specific pathway get distracted less easily. 3, your performance is poor as a leader. I mean, it's just an easy indicator, right? If your performance metrics are low, that would indicate that you're not focused. And if you're not focused, that would indicate you're probably lost as a leader. How about this? It's a bunch of propositions. You say stuff, but you don't give images or paint pictures for people. And that's something I struggle with a lot. And I'm trying to be better at it. Some of the greatest preachers out there, you know what they do? It's not that they're great at communicating. You know what they're great at? They'll do an object illustration every single week. You know, people give me good feedback all the time. But the sermons I'm 100% confident I'm going to get positive feedback on is if I show a picture or I do an illustration every single time. It never failed. Well, I don't want to do illustrations every week. Well, then expect half the people to be lost by the time you leave, because it was just a bunch of propositions that they can't put into their daily life. I'm not saying I got to do one every single time, but you got to paint a picture for people. How about this? Doesn't say enough stuff. Any leaders absent of words? They don't spend enough time casting vision or telling you what they expect. Well, not only are you lost, but it might be that they're lost. Leaders where it's all about them and not about the mission. And I struggle with this one because it's natural for me to think about myself. And that's where I'm going to default if I'm not mission focused and focused on the pathways to success. And so when you see a leader that's narcissistic, all of us are narcissistic to a certain extent, but if you see a leader leaning into the narcissistic side of his leadership, they're probably lost and missing the vision. And I've been unhealthy in that way in some ways. Others, it's more about kumbaya than keeping it up. Now, I was just trying to say something with the letter K after kumbaya. These are the people, it's like, hey, let's do a retreat. Retreats are good. Are they focused? Hey, let's meet more. Hey, let's spend some time together and do a team building activity. Those aren't bad. But if that's what you lean on, rather than casting a clear vision and letting people make their own decisions and exercise autonomy in their specific areas so that they would be successful, well, then you're just trying to get everybody to like each other. There's nothing wrong with strong relationships, but if that's what it is, then you're just kumbayaing, if that's a word. And then the one I wanted to add is, oh gosh, whatever. You might be lost if, oh gosh, I'll text it later if I can remember it. So that indicates that you might be lost. Those are the things. So how do you effectively see these routes towards success, these solutions that are trouble, or you're having a hard time finding, or that you're having trouble finding? How do you see these routes? And here are a couple things that I think will really be practical for you in terms of just doing it. Number one, know your space. Know your space. I didn't do leaders or learners this year. I always do some version of it. I didn't this time. Here you go. Here's your leaders or learners. If you don't know your space, then you're not like, where you got to know what you're doing. Like, if I don't know the Bible, what am I doing? And again, I'm not going to know everything, and the Lord can speak through me in spite of my ignorance. But if I don't learn this stuff, what am I doing? If I don't know the ministry space, what am I doing? If you don't know your area of supposed expertise, what are you doing? Know your space. Josiah knew what his space was. Hezekiah knew what his space was. The good leaders of Israel didn't necessarily go fight a bunch of battles unless they had to. The great leaders of Israel addressed areas within their control, like religion and the legal system. They actually worked on those things as opposed to building up idols to make Assyria happy or whatever else they could have done, or to make the people happy. What they did was they built systems because they knew their area of control and they knew what they were supposed to do. And when Josiah became aware of the lost book of the law and he looked at it, he read it before everybody. He said, we need to know. He became intimately aware of what his space was. Learn, learn, learn. That's one way to see the route. The second thing, and be careful with this, but it's still an important one. That's why I put it down. Your gut is going to tell you something. And some of the best decisions I've ever made have been with my gut. You might say the leading of the Spirit. You might say your gut. I say spirit or my gut, which is indigestion. That's the joke. It's either or, and sometimes it's not going to be effective, but sometimes going with your gut is the best thing you can do because you don't have the answers you need to make an educated decision. But your gut is there for a reason. And if you feel unsettled, there's a reason for that. And if you feel settled, there's a reason for that. And just like you don't know if it's a bone, muscle, or tendon, sometimes you don't know what your body's trying to tell you, and you just go with your gut when it comes to finding solutions. Your gut will give you a solution you've never thought of. It does all the time. So trust yourself a little bit and develop a level of discernment and pray to God for discernment. And he'll give it to you. Number 3, look at what people have done before. Now, this is very practical, and nobody does it. And I'm going to be very clear on this one. I don't care if it's been done before. No one told you that being a great leader was being 100% original all the time. In fact, great leaders don't waste time on things that have already been done effectively. So one basic example is I have this thing called a one-pager. It doesn't mean it's one page. It means that to get everybody else on the same page really quickly when you have 100 people running an event, I would rather do one document that they can all look at and find clarity with rather than me have to tell 100 people. Yet, for some reason, every organization I've been a part of decides they want to keep everything up here and never put it down here. And so when I got here, I started saying, we're going to do one-pagers because I don't want to have to ask you every little detail. Just send it over to me. I'll read it in less than 5 minutes and I'll know everything. And then I'll feel confident. And every time it never fails, no matter what staff it is or how good they are. And I don't know why this happens, but I'll say, hey, do me a one-pager. There's a bunch of templates of former one-pagers in our Google Drive. You got them? Yeah, I got them. And then when they send me a one-pager, it's something that they mocked up on a piece of paper. I'm like, how much extra time did that take you? Why don't you just grab the one from the exact same event that we did last year and make incremental adjustments to it based on the feedback we got? And I'm not mad about it. It's like, just look at what's been done. That's what they told me when I first went into public accounting. Just look at the spreadsheet from last year and then make the adjustments based on your auditing work. Cool. Look at what's been done. And if you've seen success done before you, there's nothing wrong with picking up on that and moving forward. It doesn't make you a bad leader to steal from people who have done other things. Some of the biggest churches in our country, people are just stealing sermons from other pastors and re-preaching them so they can spend more time on doing the administrative work of the church. For me as a creative, it irks me, but it's effective. And so that's where I'm thinking more. Why would I not do an illustration that I've seen a million times over if it's an effective illustration? It affects me as a creative, but that doesn't make it a good leadership move or a bad leadership move. The last one, find something no one has done before. If you're still in the problem, maybe none of the solutions have been effective. And it's up to you to be creative and think of something that's never been done. The last thing, execution is key. So you can become aware of the problem and you can find solutions to the problem, but unless you enact those solutions, nothing happens. And this is where Josiah and Hezekiah stood apart. The difference between a dreamer and a doer is movement. If you don't move, you're going to remain stationary. For example, I tell myself, I'm just as good of a preacher as Billy Graham. I am in my head, but he took what he dreamed and actually put it to work, right? And so that's where execution makes a huge difference. I'm probably just as good of a basketball player as Michael Jordan up here. I can think of the way to do it. I can think of the solution, but some people have the discipline to enact it. And this is where Josiah, Hezekiah, and even Solomon were effective. And so my 2 points here, one, stop just talking. You got to talk. Stop just talking. Move. Do it. If it comes to your mind, just do it. How often, I've talked about this, how often are you trying to clean when you just need to do something? You just do it and you'll feel better. Number two, start with a note. And this goes back to the one pager. If it's only in your brain, it's going to fall down the drain. I don't know why I had to rhyme it, but I just felt like it. If it's only in your brain, it's down the drain. For real, your brain cannot keep track of it. Write it down. You got ideas for the future, write it down. I have learned the art of, as soon as I get a shower thought for the sermon the next Sunday, I'm writing it down on my notes immediately. Otherwise, I'll fall asleep, wake up, and it'll never come back to me. And then I lost the best thing God gave me. Write that stuff down. And if it's down now on paper, you can go back to it later. Yeah? All right. God, we thank you for today. I thank you for this group. I pray that their feedback would be helpful and not hurtful. And God, I pray that anything that they've gleaned from this class or intensive would go immediately into their workflow, regardless of where that workflow is. I pray that you would bless them today and let them be the leaders you've always called them to be. And with their action steps, I pray that you would give them success and productivity. It is in Jesus' name that we pray. And all God's people said, sorry, I was 1 minute late today. Looking for those leadership steps and those feedbacks. And when I get time, I'm going to go through them and probably you'll get feedback over the next couple of weeks on different videos and stuff. It's been crazy. Thank y'all for this class. Is 5 weeks too long, too short? That would be good for the feedback. We did 6 weeks last year. No. Yeah, we did 6. I remember by the 6th week, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this. 4 weeks felt too short when I did it in the past. 5 weeks is, if we did this y'all don't have to stay. But if we did this in perpetuity, if we did it periodically, we could literally go through the whole Bible in a couple of years. Just saying. Depending on how intense I make it. Maybe I'll do the whole Pentateuch next time. All first 5 books of the Bible. 150 chapters or whatever. 56. What I will do is probably, even if I just did 2, I'll probably try to line up with Bible reading plans so it's kind of similar. Yeah. Now, but you don't have to read 1st, 2nd Chronicles later in the year. But I think right now it's getting pretty, no, it's not. Where are y'all at in the Bible reading? Y'all still in like Ruth and 1st, 2nd Samuel? Oh. Oh, you're doing the old and new. Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, the church one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't know anyone